Hello there, it's Gloria Hester here, and I'm here with my dear mentor and friend, Eleanor Criswell Hanna, and I'm so happy, Eleanor, that you said, yes, let's have this conversation and so to share with people. So thank you.
Thank you. You and I have had many wonderful conversations over the years. So I'm very happy to share this one that you want to share.
Yeah, me too. So many things I want to share and want to ask you about. And I want to start with talking about Equine Hanna Somatics, the work that you adapted from Hanna Somatics and how you did that. But specifically, just so that I make sure that we get this part in, is I would love for us to talk about the horse's personal responses and how when the horse is actualizing their potential, it means they're both as that individual and then as part of the herd. Because I know that's something we would love to talk about.
Yeah. So I'm becoming more and more aware of the horse's personal responses. I'm being educated by the horses. I'm being experientially coming into it more and more in terms of intuitively and real in terms of realizations and so forth. So I would like to, I think you want me to talk about how it originally happened.
I do.
Because I would not have chosen to do this myself. I did not say, I think I want to do this. I was 65 years old at the time. I've done a lot in my life. And so to do this and to launch it at this age is kind of amazing. It's like, what? Now? Why didn't we do this earlier? No, why now? Okay, so I have a very dear friend whose name is Dennis Rees. He's one of the natural horsemanship clinicians, and he's toured the country a lot in his life, teaching people how to do natural horsemanship and how to work with their horses in a kinder, more relationship kind of way. But he invited me to come to his ranch, which at that point was in Pengrove. He still has that ranch in Pengrove, but he has a larger one that's on 101 south of Petaluma called Reese River Ranch. And it's 630 acres with a lot of natural scenery. And he's very much involved with wine making these days. And he started off as a little boy helping with wine.
I didn't know that.
Merchandising. Yeah. As a little boy, he was helping with that. But
he's coming
later
full circle there.
He's coming full circle there. But he has been a horse lover his whole life, as have I been. So I was very horse crazy when I was a little girl, and we could not afford to have a horse, nor did my parents have any experience with horses. But I was absolutely crazy about them, painting them, sculpting them, becoming them, doing everything about them night and day. The yard was full of them, and and they would find a way to let me be with a horse every once in a while, like summer camp or the riding club or something. But I was a horse lover. I didn't own a horse until I was in my 20s, and my brother-in-law allowed me to breed his mare, take her by hand. I was living in Kentucky at the time, lead her by hand to a nearby stallion who was a very small stallion. He was more pony-sized stallion, but she did become pregnant and did have a little foal that was a little paint foal. And so I worked with this little mare for quite a while until I had to move away, et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't own a horse again until I was in my late 20s. And I sort of accidentally bought this horse. I was a friend visiting, and we were driving around. She said, "When did you do something outrageous?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And there was a sign there that said, "Horses for sale." So we drove up the hill to where the horses were, and I bought one of them.
Wow. Wow.
And Thomas Hanna helped me pay for it.
Oh,
Wasn't expensive, but I kept her and worked with her for about 30 years at a ranch not far from my house.
mhm.
And then eventually she had to cross the Rainbow Bridge. And a little bit later, a year or so later, I bought a gelding and had him for quite a few years.
Mhm.
But so during that time, Dennis Reese, who was a client of Thomas Hanna's due to his rodeo injuries. And I can tell you about that and name him because he talked about it on a video. And I do distribute that video so you can get the video where he is doing Equine Hanna Somatics under my guidance. And he talks about it, how he got into it originally.
Yes. Yeah, that's a wonderful video. I remember it's with a horse named Karma. So,
Yes, you're right, Karma, who was a Premarin baby. She was a Premarin
oh, okay.
baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And so you can see some of the first Equine Hanna Somatics work. And he's so good because he's so knowledgeable, and his hands are so kind and knowledgeable.
Mhm.
Horses love him.
Yeah.
So during all of that, he began to work with me again when Thomas died in an automobile accident. And he, after a certain amount of time, he made an appointment to see me for somatic work because of injuries,
Yeah.
work-related injuries. So during that time, he thought he'd love to share it with his riders who came to him for clinics at
Yeah.
his ranch, natural horsemanship clinics. So he brought me in, and I taught classes, and I worked with individuals,
Yeah.
shared some somatic yoga and
Mhm.
some somatics and all of that. And during that time, he asked me, did I think it could be done with horses? He said at dinner, over dinner.
I've always been so grateful that he asked that question.
I know, it was so wonderful. He doesn't really realize to this day, although I have tried to help him understand it.
Mhm. Mhm. So
But
grateful.
it's so amazing to think of that he can't quite get it. And that is that he started a whole thing, a big thing,
Mhm.
international thing, by his question. Because he's very creative, very innovative, and he was always coming up with new things to try and do. So he said, do you think it could be done with horses? And I thought briefly and I said, probably. So I went home to figure it out.
Mhm.
And so I read various books, I watched videos, I did various things. And all of a sudden, one day, it came to me how we could do it and the fact that we could do it. And so the next time I was in Northern California, I came out to his ranch to show him. And I happened to come when Shirley Park was there with her horse Tristan, who is the historical horse.
Yes.
Yeah. And Tristan was a thoroughbred chestnut, beautiful, very intelligent, and very much his own horse. He just was his own being. And so we tried it with him, and he responded immediately. There was no doubt
Yes.
that he was relaxing because
Yes.
right there.
Yes.
And so I said to myself, okay. And I got a sense of its potential. It's kind of an intuitive sense of of the far-reaching quality of it. And even though it wasn't known at all, I knew its potential. I still know its potential. And pardon me?
I just agreed. I just said,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so since that time, which is about 20 years ago now, several years later, like about 4 years later, I decided to do a training program. And you were in one of the first training programs.
Yeah. Yeah. That was 2007. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is remarkable to watch the horses responding to it. And that's part of what's told me so much about what it is and how it's valuable and why it needs to exist. And fortunately, now that we've conducted the training for a bunch of years, there are more and more people who know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and who've tried it with various horses and feedback tell me and you and others just how profound the experience is. Now, it's profound for the horse, but it's very profound for the person who's doing it with the horse. So this is very horse-centered. It's the use of Hanna Somatics principles with another species. In this case, it's a horse.
Yeah.
But it's very compatible
Right.
with other beings.
As you're sharing that, Eleanor, if I may share this, I met a horse in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I was there working with a group, and this one horse, after we had worked with him, just a private session with him, he was in another area of the barn while other things were happening. Maybe I was working with some other horses, and then later I came to walk through that area of the barn, and he was standing there showing another horse the work we had done together.
Really?
Yes. And so, like you, over the years, you're saying I've seen these more, and and that was pretty early on. It's probably maybe around 2008 or somewhere in there, 2009. And he was showing him everything, and then in Arizona, I met a horse who he was the horse we worked with for a 3-day retreat, and I saw him a week later. I was down there to work with some humans, with some people. And as we were about to go in, that horse was tied to the trailer, and he was waiting to go to a roping, and he turned to look at me, and he made sure that we could see each other, that I was watching him, and that he stood there and he did everything we had done together as a group a week prior in the sequential way we had worked. And he just kept looking at me like, do you see, and the people with me were, needless to say, we were just in awe of him and who he is. And so I'm, as you know, a big fan of the horse and advocate for the horse, as in the ways I have known to be. So thank you for letting me know that. Just as you were sharing that, it made me think about the horse's potential. So.
Well, I love to hear that. And we are discovering more and more about what horses are capable of. And that's an example of capable of learning something and teaching it to another horse and or demonstrating it for them. And all of that.
So it's
Because,
really professional.
yeah, because prior to this, we thought horses couldn't do that. We thought horses didn't do that. A lot of things we thought horses didn't do, but we are finding out, we researchers and horse owners and so forth and so trainers and stuff are finding out this whole range of behaviors that horses are capable of.
It's beautiful. I remember reading The Tao of Equus by Linda Kohana, and I remember in that book, and I may not be saying this the way she said it in the book because it's so long ago that I read it, but it definitely made an impression on me. She talked about how she came to realize in her own herd that one of her horses that she thought wasn't very intelligent was actually quite intelligent, but that he had to kind of dumb down around humans and adapt. And so he had this whole other, I could use the word persona maybe. He was a certain persona when humans were around, and then his true self he was quite different than what he could show humans or had shown humans. So that really made an impression on me to read that.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, and there's so many aspects of that. So many levels, like, for example, they are very stoic. As much as possible, they won't show you that they are hurting. And because of the ramifications of it. So that there are all these levels of what they are doing. For example, if it's not safe here, I will retreat within myself, and you won't know that I understand what you're saying, that I can do what you're saying, and all sorts of aspects of it for self-protection. But in given a chance where it's safe and appreciated and so forth, all kinds of behaviors can be expressed.
Yes. Yeah. Would you say the way my mind works, I think, well, that has to be across the species for humans and for horses,
It
all
is.
sentient beings. And
So you look at a person, and the person may be very intelligent, but they have never been encouraged to express it. If they have expressed it, it has been downplayed or ignored or whatever. So they learn really well how to not show it in all circumstances. But when given a chance or encouraged or it's appreciated, all kinds of things are available.
Yeah. I know in our physical bodies, I think about with a horse, his shoulder had been what anyone would have called atrophied, and he was an off the track thoroughbred, but they would say, well, his shoulder, the muscles are atrophied. But I was working with a group of students, and I was just teaching them some things. It was a human collaboration. There were massage therapists, different people there, physicists, it wasn't just horse people. But it was so interesting, Eleanor, because his shoulder just blossomed. His brain allowed the muscle to just, fill up again, and the circulation was there again. And it wasn't like, a lot of people, the way they've been taught to think, it's like, oh, you have to go through this big rehab program. It's going to take months. It was 15 minutes of us just, me teaching them principles that I wanted them to know for their humans, and so it makes me I think it's connected with what you said in our physical being as well as our emotional body. And thank you for helping me. I know sometimes you would just stop everything and you would say, because I would say, well, it's hard to describe. And you would just kind of stop everything and say, well, describe it, so you would create it.
Go ahead, describe it. Yeah.
It's like that. Most
Yeah.
people would call that being put on the spot, but I knew that that was necessary for someone like me. I felt like it was necessary. So thank you for doing that. So,
Because also sometimes people don't know that what they would say would be very valuable as a description. Whatever you thought to say would be significant.
yeah. I remember specifically in that case, it was around with me sensing different levels of energy in the room. And I know we don't use words like that. And so I thought, well, I don't know how to say this, but I can feel this at this level and this at this level. I was really hesitant to say, that I didn't understand. That's why I might have even been sensing that. I can't say that I really know why, but I just know that I did, and I know that it was, but I can't,
Well,
so.
I know why. Because in your life, you are aware of energies because you've been safer when you have known what the energies were like in different circumstances.
Yes. Yeah. I remember traveling in the middle of the night in Oakland, and you said that's not safe, but I, I wanted to, yes, and you're right in many circumstances. So I suppose that would heighten that perhaps, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Sometimes people who travel in unsafe places are protected by their being, by their attitudes, by their whatever. And it's safer than it is for other people to travel in that area.
well, I'm grateful. I made it this far. So
I
uh,
know you've been in all kinds of places where it
yeah,
might have been safe,
yes, I have, and I'm grateful. So
like in barns and racing territory.
yes, definitely. Someone told me after being, introducing that to the racing industry, they, well, they said, I'm surprised you didn't come home in a body bag. So,
Right, that's what I mean.
yeah, yeah, it's a little, but
Now
I've
you have
always,
your own built-in protection, your
yeah,
own
yeah,
guardian angels or whatever they might be.
yeah. I think that, I mean, I may as well tell this, it happened in different areas, but, well, different people, both men and women have told me at different times that they would see or, beings around me. I had no cognition of that whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
But enough people told me that in different parts of the country that I thought, well, they can't all be delusional, and and so
Mm-hmm.
so I'm grateful to have had,
Yeah.
very grateful. So
Uh,
I didn't know that our conversation would go there. So you can see me, I kind of start to squirm, but it is what happened, so sometimes I think about different things that have happened, and writing about those things, and I think, well, do I want to tell that? And I think, well, that is what happened, and it's okay,
Mm-hmm.
in our culture, if we don't have the level of understanding or common understanding for it yet, because I think that
Mm-hmm.
we will,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
eventually. So yeah, and with so many things, and um so I think it's okay to share those. Think about a horse that I met in another country, and that horse, actually I never met that horse, but if you would like to share your thoughts on this, it might be fun for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a horse that I didn't actually meet her. I met many of her herd mates, but they told me that this particular horse, she was a rescue, they had lots of rescues there. And when they would go to feed her in the mornings, she could be, she'd charge the door, ears back, teeth bared, charge the door. They were terrified, but they needed to take care of her. They had to take care of her, but they were really afraid. And they said, we don't know what to do. And immediately I said, change her name. She doesn't like her name. And I don't even remember the name. I know they would, but we changed, she had a new name. We changed her name. And then I was back at that center. It may have been, I don't know, 3 or 4 days later. And they said, thank you so much. The next morning we opened the stall door and she just stood there and looked at us. And they were really happy and I was really happy. And I can't say in that moment, but that did happen. And the reason I'm sharing this, I had thought about sharing that when writing animal stories, but I thought, well, I can't share that. That sounds like horse people might think, she's a weirdo or she's crazy or whatever.
Mhm.
And I was, pretty cognizant of that gap there between some of these things, right? But right as at that time, I have a friend who's an artist. I have several friends that are artists. And she said, you have to tell that story. People want to hear that story. You have to tell it. So I thought, okay, I'll be courageous and I will. And then immediately I heard a story. I heard Dennis Reese, someone asked him in one of his groups. So I'm sorry, not Dennis Reese, Mark Rashid. Someone asked Mark Rashid what he thought about animal communication. And literally, I had already decided I wouldn't write about that. I wouldn't share that because someone like Mark Rashid would think I was weird. And he
Mm.
would think she's just a weird person. And, Equine Hanna Somatics, I didn't want him to associate things that people might think, oh, that's too woo-woo or this kind of thing. And
Mhm.
that you're not grounded and that you don't know neuroscience, and that you don't know what you're talking about, or that you don't know horses. All these things,
Mhm.
can play in depending on who the gatekeeper is for that particular horse. So I had thought, well, I will not share that. But then when I heard the question to Mark Rashid, which was, what do you think about animal communication? And he
Mhm.
said, well, I don't want to automatically discount it. He said, but I do have a hard time believing a horse would care what their name was. And I thought, okay, well, I know firsthand that some do. And I had that experience and it did happen. And so I thought, well, I will share it. And I'll just share that part of it too, about my own inner dialogue about horsemen and what they might think and what they might be ready for. Or because I was always just saying, well, let's just get to the horse, So
Mhm.
anything you want to share on that? So thoughts,
Mhm.
your thoughts.
Oh, well, I've heard several anecdotes about animals that did prefer to have their names changed. And when you think about what a horse's name, the thing is, horses are listening to us when we're standing there talking, just as children are. They're
Yes.
standing there listening to us. And if we're saying, this is my problem child, guess what this child is going to be doing?
Mhm.
Being a problem child, because they like to do what we want them to do, just as horses like to do what we want them to do. So if you're using a name that is not necessarily a good name, like Rebel, let's
Mm.
call a horse Rebel. Well, is that is that going to set you up for a compatible relationship?
Yeah. 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 I
Maybe not, maybe not.
uh-huh.
But
Yes.
I find it cute and amusing that a horse or even a panther
Mhm.
wants to have a different name.
Mhm.
So there's a YouTube video showing a woman who's consulting with a panther owner and discovering the panther wants its name changed.
Wow. Yeah.
And you know, it's important if this is the name you're going to be hearing all the time and it has an attitude attached to it,
Mhm.
it's going to have an effect. You might find yourself rebelling against your name or acting it out
Mhm. Mhm.
or what. But anyways, I
Yeah.
like it. I like it as kind of dear, the whole thing there.
Yeah. I'm just really grateful that I just immediately was like, she doesn't like her name, change her name. I knew, but it just was there. And I'm grateful that they weren't getting charged every morning to care for her and that she didn't feel that she needed to do that anymore.
Mm.
And I think that's the part of it where I would love, that is a thing of mine. I don't, I would think it is of yours too. I would love it if more people had more permission to just know what they know, and not to prove it to anyone, but to just
Mhm.
know what they know.
Know what they know and behave in terms of it. Yeah.
Mhm.
So the work that I have been sharing over the years is an application of the human Hanna Somatics, which is working with the human's nervous system to help it change its body in ways that it needs to or wants to. But this is applied to horses. So sometimes people will ask me when they know that I work with people and horses, they are saying, is this for the people?
Mhm.
'Cause there are a lot of people-oriented horse
Yeah.
programs.
Mhm.
But no, this is not for the people. It's for the horses. It's horse-centered. It's also the application of humanistic psychology principles to the work with horses. So
Yeah.
it's very horse-centered, and you're working with the horse and not on the horse, and you're showing the horse some other ways of being rather than chronically contracted tight muscles and all of those things, and helping the horse be more comfortable and happier. They become happier,
Mhm.
which is amazing to see. So
Yeah.
the horse is dancing around the arena
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
rather than, hmm?
I think because it feels good to move again, and then maybe some of
Yeah.
those prime mover muscles that were held tight,
Uh-huh.
they're not tight anymore. They're able to feel, like you said, happier. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
not.
they feel younger, they act younger, they may be flirting rather than not flirting with anybody. And wanting to show off, look what I can do.
Yeah, yeah,
Look what I can do.
yes. I remember you sharing with me that you would wake up in the mornings, um, with your equine anatomy book and your cup of coffee, and you
Mhm.
would sit and you would kind of map, to create. I would suppose that was around the time when Dennis was asking you those questions. Could you talk a little bit about what that was like?
Oh, well, just that it's something I do all the time. I do all the time. I do it all the time, and I'm doing it now.
Yeah. Yes.
I am studying it, and also usually I work once a week with a Mustang whose name is Espy, which is short for Esperanza, because she is of Spanish descent. She is a Kiger Mustang from the Kiger Mustangs in Oregon. So she's southeastern Oregon. They were not discovered until the 70s. So they've been free and by themselves for many years since they became feral from the Spanish. And so they have a big Spanish bloodline from the Iberian horses that were brought over here by the Spanish. She is beautiful. If you want to see what she looks like, you can Google Kiger Mustangs, Kiger, and you can see videos of them. And many of them look like her. She is kind of a silver color with black mane and tail.
Yeah.
And sometimes she looks golden
Mm.
during certain times of the year
Oh, wow.
when the light is on her in a certain way. She's moving toward 20 now. I began working with her when she was 17. And she is such a teacher. She has taught me so much. And also Kathy Sparling, who owns her at their ranch, um, Wind Horse Ranch in Sebastopol.
Uh-huh.
And I've just learned so much from her in a very, of course, nonverbal way, but just think about this, consider that.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that's standing out more right now is the horse's capacities to know what you're thinking
Mhm.
and what's coming. So they're a little precognitive and they're very intuitive. So you have to be very careful what you think around them, because they also do want to please you frequently. And so if you are having a thought such as, this horse probably isn't going to want to pick up its hoof for me,
Mhm.
it won't pick up its hoof
Mhm.
because it has gotten the message and that's what you want and that's what it's going to do.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so there are many things that you're going to want to do. You need to keep the thought of what you want to do
Yeah.
rather than doubts and you have to watch your emotions when you're around them. Don't work with them if you are worried,
Yeah.
upset about something, and so forth and so on, because they are so sensitive and they mirror us. And
Mhm.
so don't share those things. But you will feel better because as you know, you're in their heart field,
Mhm.
which is electromagnetic field, which is much larger than ours and is big.
Yeah. I was just sharing with the horsewoman. I said, I think that people may not realize this, but when they're with their horses and they are having their hands on their horses,
Ah,
it's a form of grounding because the horses are always grounding on the earth. They're always connected to the earth, and
mhm,
especially if they get to be barefoot, and so then that all of that wonderful, the native EMFs that we're meant to be around and connected to all the time, you're getting that, for people who they may not realize it, but it's happening. And so
mhm.
originally I just always thought about the horse's magnetic field, but then I didn't think about the more obvious, connection to nature that's there as well. So
Yeah, so it's more than just, they're part of the earth field,
mhm.
and we become part of it more intimately when we are closer to them.
Yeah, they're so I wrote something one time about how horses had carried man for since the beginning of time, and how
Mhm,
they carried our burdens in a way, and then not me as an individual not wanting them to carry anyone's emotional burdens or anyone's, like you said, if they feel stressed or rushed, I don't want the horses to carry those burdens from
mhm,
others as well. And it used to be physical burdens, and I think now sometimes it can be also emotional things, and um just around maybe the mirror neurons and things like that.
mhm,
But just that they don't, if they start to hold it, I wouldn't want them to hold it, so
mhm,
uh
mhm.
yeah.
Well,
So
they don't hold things as much as we do,
mm,
but physically, the contracted muscles that get started can be continued, et cetera, et cetera. There are ways they can hold things,
mhm.
but they tend not to hold things.
Yeah, if they didn't have their natural opportunities and how to just go and move and roll and have fun and just move, if they didn't have those opportunities, and they may have been being used in therapeutic settings for as part of a counseling or therapy,
Mhm.
I would want those horses to have lots of space to
Yeah,
do what
yeah.
they do.
Mhm. To clear themselves. Yeah.
hmm Also, just if one thing too is like if someone feels rushed, not to try to work with their horse somatically when they feel rushed.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, like you said, that's
Yeah.
stress. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Do
so
something else instead.
Uh-huh. Would you share some of the humanistic psychology perspective that you feel like is forefront and center? I know working with the horse, not on the horse.
Mhm. I
Mm,
would be happy to. So one of the things in humanistic psychology is unconditional positive regard. So in a psychotherapy relationship, you are relating to the client in a very accepting, appreciating, and so forth, regardless of what they're dealing with, and so forth and so on. So, so relating to the horse from that perspective, unconditional positive regard. And one of the things that we are pointing out through Equine Hanna Somatics is that a lot of the horse's behaviors are reflexes that have gotten triggered by something that was done. They're not doing it on purpose, this movement that they just did.
mhm,
It was triggered, it is a reflex, and knowing what the reflexes are, and when you're dealing with reflexes or other things in the environment is very, very important. So unconditional positive regard, this horse is doing the best it can, etc., etc. So that's one. Accurate empathy. We humans tend to empathize with horses. We read things into their behaviors, and we're not always accurate. The horse did such and such because he doesn't like me.
mm.
Well, maybe he did not do that because he doesn't like you. He did that because he's tired or because he,
Uh-huh.
so being
Yeah,
able to empathize, but
yeah,
having an accurate empathy,
yeah.
not some sort of fictional empathy.
Mhm, mhm,
Okay. And being authentic with the person you're working with. In this case, being authentic with the horse. So, one of the things they say sometimes in equine guided psychotherapy and that kind of thing is that the horse um, may be responding to you, but, and it might be meaningful. Well, it might not be meaningful. It may have to do with a fly landed on.
I'm so glad we're talking about this. The horse world I grew up in, none of those were a concern. This is more of a modern adaptation. So I'm really glad that we're talking about that, that you're talking about that. So,
Well, it's so nice that you grew up in the horse world you grew up in because you can speak authentically about what that was like. And it has changed. It has changed a lot.
yes, it has.
People are still in that world,
Hmm.
but a lot of people are not in that world now.
Yeah.
So we want accurate empathy. The horse doesn't want to do that. Is it true the horse doesn't want to do that? Or is it that the horse can't do that?
That is yes, all of these I think are so monumental, each one. I just feel that, it's so, so beautiful. It's
Yes.
true, so true.
You are my colleague, Alyssa Mayer, who I co-teach with and who's working with me in Equine Hanna Somatics. We were talking about the fact that the horse is sensing what you're thinking
Mhm.
in pictures or in words or in attitudes or whatever. And here you are as the human being that this horse is attending to.
Mhm.
And you're thinking, let's go over there. No, let's go over here. No, let's stop. No, the horse doesn't want to do that. All of these ideas. And the
Mhm.
horse is trying to figure out what, what, what does she want me to do?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's getting frustrated it's getting its feelings hurt. It's various things are happening with not being able to follow your requests. What are the requests? I really like the one where you want the horse to move forward, but you are looking at the ground. Okay? And the horse wants to go where you are intending to go. Well, going forward is not included in the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't go forward. You seem to be telling me to stop or to do something else, or you're afraid of going forward, or
Yeah.
various things.
Yeah. Yeah. Their level of sensitivity is beyond what I think humans realize, just
Mhm.
the level of sensitivity. And maybe some of that's conditioning among humans, cultural conditioning or societal conditioning about how things work. And the horse didn't get the memo. So they are not limited, the way the
Right,
person might be.
right.
So, yeah. Um, with unconditional positive regard, is it Fritz Perls or Carl Rogers
Carl Rogers.
Carl Rogers? Okay. So I was wondering, I knew it was one of the two. So
Yeah.
I think that alone is a principle for anyone who is, works with horses, no matter what stage they're in their horse relationship or horse journey, horsemanship.
Mhm.
That's something that if we can hold that in ourselves, I think that, like you said, horses, they do know what we're thinking. And so just that as a principle can change, I think, how you are with a horse.
Yeah,
Just the one, just
yeah.
that whole one, taking
As
one.
a human being, when you have a feeling that someone has an attitude about you, it's very likely, there's been research on it, that you will try to comply with it.
Mm,
So if the human has an attitude of this horse is not what I wanted, this horse is not capable of X, this horse is resisting me, this horse, I wish I'd gotten another horse, all these sorts of things, they are aware and are kind of trying to comply.
mm,
So one of the nice things about a horse is that they do feed back your state to you. So if you're feeling anxious, they will get anxious. So the way for you to feel less anxious is to quiet down your anxiety. So it's like feedback. If I get anxious, my horse is going to get anxious. Therefore, I should quiet down my anxiety. And
mm.
I know how to do that, and I'm going to do it. And so there's this back and forth kind of thing. Okay, I'm getting anxious again. Okay, my horse is getting anxious too. Well,
Yes. And that's one of the things that I didn't think to mention. There are many things that we could mention about your history and what you've done, and is that you helped to pioneer biofeedback research before it had a name. And
yeah.
yeah, so it's just wonderful, all the things that your amazing contributions, and I'm grateful that the universe saw fit to to bring us together
Yeah,
the way it has. So,
I feel the same way.
oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy that we got to do this today. And
Me too. It's just fun and
yeah,
such good ideas, such so worthwhile. And
yeah,
I wish you the very best as you continue to expand your communications and your teaching people and horses and dogs and other beings.
yes, we've had quite an expanded group of beings in the different species. So
Yeah.
that's been a fun and continuing to teach myself, as you know. So
Mhm.
so it's been
Mhm.
is I know I don't know, in the interest of time, if there's anything that you feel like that we would want to cover that we didn't cover.
Mm.
Um, that you would like to share?
Okay. Just to say that it continues to expand. It will continue to expand. And we just need to be open to it and receptive to it as this interspecies communications continue, and they're urgently needed in the world right now
Mm,
for
yeah,
all of us.
yes, yeah, yeah. So, one of the things that's coming to mind I think about is a certain animal I know, her hips, the sides of her hips, her fur, she's of the canine species, but she's has her fur on the sides of her hips are more, kind of matted. And
Mm,
I'll notice with animals, when you see that, you know that they're not getting the same amount of
mhm,
information to that area of their body from their brain that they
mhm,
would be ideal.
right, mhm,
So, just I think more ways, if they're not able to do certain movements. I think that's where I am right now developmentally, is helping them find ways to do movements that are comfortable, that they
mhm,
can't necessarily access those muscle groups
mhm.
easily. So
Right. So you kinetic mirror those areas that they can't move.
yeah, right. For the people watching, we can talk about kinetic mirroring if you like, about what that is for an animal, to bring the two areas closer together. So
Bring
um,
ends of muscles closer together so the muscle can shorten and therefore pull on its tendons and therefore stimulate the Golgi tendon organs and therefore stimulate the relaxation of the muscles.
yes, yeah. Um, I think that the knowledge has been around for so long, but to be able to apply it with animals,
Mm-hmm.
really, I'm very grateful for that. So,
Me too. So
yeah.
we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thank you, Eleanor. I
Thank you
appreciate it.
so much, Gloria. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.